Hello, back again. This is Martha Alderson, also known as the Plot Whisperer, and we are doing this plot series called How Do I Plot a Novel, Memoir, or Screenplay? And today we're in a very interesting location. Any of you who are following along on our Santa Cruz traveling mystery tour, you may want to note what's sort of around me. I hope that maybe you can make out some of the little displays here. It's a very unique setting. So anyway, what we're talking about today is cause and effect. Cause and effect is probably one of the most important plot tools in that cause and effect will keep your story tight. It will make it feel like what happens at the end is inevitable, that the whole story has been building to these moments and to the turning points, and will bring continuity and thematic significance to the piece if you try to think about having the scenes work together, so that the scenes don't just come as sort of a sequential lining up of this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, but that they're more presented by cause and effect. Because this happened to the protagonist, she then chooses to do this next. And because of that choice or that decision or that, being thrust into something out of her control, then something happens next. And sometimes that cause and effect can sort of move between scenes. So it might not be so tight that it's one scene and then the next scene. It could be one scene and then the effect of that will come many scenes later. It's hot in here. Anyway, so the example I'm doing today is this book. It's called The Help. I don't know if you've read it, but it's fabulous. Sorry, I'm in a greenhouse and I'm really hot. But towards the end of this book, what happens is the protagonist of this book is writing a book about, she's in the Deep South and she's writing a book about maids. And so she calls to this interested New York editor to say, I will have the manuscript in January as agreed to. And then because of that, she learns that there's a new deadline. All of a sudden this editor says, no, we're not going to do January. If you want to play this game and you want to get into being published and you want a chance, you're going to have this ready. And I think it was about 2 weeks. So because that happens, she then has to go to one of her cohorts that is writing the book with her, which is an actual maid or a servant, or they weren't slaves then, but that whole sort of mentality. So because she tells her about the new deadline, they're both very anxious. They're being observed, they're being watched, they know that they are in big trouble. If they were caught for what they're doing, writing about what they're writing about, they both could suffer big consequences, almost death. And so the stakes are really, really high. So because that she had spoken to the editor, and the editor not only told her about the change in deadline, she also said, you must have had a maid too. And I want you to put something in about your own maid in this story. As soon as she hears that, it triggers something visceral for the protagonist, because this maid was like her mother. They were so tight. She loved this woman loved her. And then when the protagonist went off to college, they used to correspond every week, letters back and forth. They were still very, very close. And then all of a sudden, mysteriously, she disappears, the maid disappears, and the protagonist never hears from her again, never sees her again, and no one will tell her what has happened. So because that happens, when she's talking to her cohort, she says, I have to include this information. I need to know what happened to my maid. Well, this cohort actually does know what happened. But she doesn't want to tell the protagonist face to face. She says, I'll write it down for her. So because that happens, the protagonist does find out. And what's really pivotal about this is because in the step that we spoke about last time, we talked about having lost something years ago, you know, where your perfect world is upset by something that happens, and it can happen when you're really young as a child, it can happen when you're older, it can happen anytime when you're going along with your life and everything seems to be going great, and then boom, something happens. You lose a parent, somebody deceives you, you've been betrayed, you know, the world as you knew it now is different. Well, for this protagonist, by losing the maid, that signified that for her. It was a moment that perfection was lost. The fact that she comes home and her whole world is now different because the maid's not there anymore. So once she finds out what happened, what triggered the maid to be gone, and that her mother had something to do with it, it's a big life-changing moment for this young protagonist, and it allows her to make the choices she needs to make in order to rise to the climax at the end of the entire book. So this is just a very quick example of cause and effect, but how one thing can happen in one scene, and then because of that, it triggers all these other events that happen, or these scenes. And so that keeps it tight. The reader really knows what's at stake. They know that there's causality. They feel that everything is inevitable. And they are being told the significance because the significance lies in the scenes, in the cause, and then the effect. So for your assignment this time, I'd like you to go through the scenes that you're thinking about and that you're plotting out and that you're really concentrating on. I want you to think about how many of those scene ideas that you've come up with are triggered by cause and effect. And if there's a big jump, like say you know the end of the beginning scene and you know the the halfway mark, but you're not sure of the scenes that go in between those. There are people who write entire manuscripts based on, because this happened, what did the protagonist do next? Because she did that, what happened next? So you can help yourself trigger more scenes, come up with more scene ideas with conflict, tension, and suspense if you think in terms of cause and effect. So have fun, and we'll see you next time.